Nights harkens back to the turn of the 20th century. Skullduggery in the Latin Quarter focuses on it's contemporary, but it goes back to the lost generation of Americans in Paris in the 20s and 30s. Hemingway, Gertrude Stein, Man Ray. And not doing much writing. An Apartment in Paris, which is a memoir published this year, in which the backstory is my wife and I buying our apartment in Paris. We bought an apartment in Paris in 1995. But you know, the real story is our education into Paris, our exploration of Paris, our learning how to deal with Parisians, learning what places to eat, good places to go, exploring the back streets and the mysteries of Paris, and learning how to live every day like normal people in Paris rather than tourists. I have another Paris novel called Three's a Crowd, which is split between Paris and Las Vegas, and it's a story about three men murdering their wives. It's a crime story, obviously. I could go on and explain all of my books, but the theme that I have is that I'm being a professional writer means that I tell stories that come to mind rather than stories that publishers want me to write. So I've been all over the map with my writing. I've written, for instance, the genres in which I've won awards are political thriller, crime fiction, romantic comedy, humor, literary fiction, juvenile fiction, short stories, memoir, and something called romantic suspense. I'm not even sure what romantic suspense is, but I won an award for it. So that's that gives you a kind of an overview of what I do as a writer and how I've gotten around to the point where I'm talking in libraries. To give you an idea of what I'm doing, what I've done, or how I write, I'd like to read to you from reading one of the essays from Benjamin's Mess. I should explain that Benjamin's Mess is a term from the Bible. In Genesis chapter 43, verse 34, it reads, Benjamin's mess was 5 times as much as any of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him. This is a piece called The Atomic Mother-in-Law. The quote at the top of the essay is from The Witness of Those 2 Days, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it's a quote from an unidentified woman. I couldn't help anyone because I was seriously injured. My entire face and both of my hands were burnt. I went home to Midori Machi, stepping over bodies of the injured and the dead. They looked like forgotten baggage. And this is where I start. Perhaps my favorite memory of my mother-in-law, Ma Yoshida, is when she lost her mind. She was in her 70s. She had by then survived the A-bomb attack on Hiroshima, had raised 2 daughters and lost one, Mariko, to cancer at the age of 41. She had stoically shouldered the challenge of raising Mariko's 2 sons, and after they had left the nest, had taken on the chore of caring for her husband, whose health, balance, and disposition had deteriorated after a series of mini strokes. Pa Yoshida's increasing dependency, punctuated by falls and injuries, was the last straw. Ma Yoshida sank into a sudden, profound, impenetrable depression that was all the more alarming because she had been all her life a bundle of purposeful energy. When neither family nor doctors could rescue Ma Yoshida from her slough of despond, she ended up in the mental ward of a little hospital in the neighboring town of Ofuna. My wife, Junko, and I were dubious about the joint. The hospital was run down and gloomy, more suited, we thought, to worsening rather than dispelling a bad case of the blues. For a while, our fears lingered. But within a month, regardless of her medical care, true to the family ethos, Ma Yoshida had thoroughly mapped the territory, interrogated the staff, visited every room, and determined that she had more on the ball than any of her fellow nutcases. And, for that matter, half the nurses and even a few of the resident shrinks. Ma Yoshida took over the joint. She spent her last few weeks there before they kicked her out for being the candy striper from hell, assisting the nurses, raiding the kitchen, flirting with the doctors, and holding long, gossipy therapy sessions with the patients, whose biographies she had gotten to know better than their own families. After a long vacation from Pa Yoshida, who survived her absence, she returned home with a fresh perspective on it, an adventure to remember, and a renewed patience with her husband's trials. This rejuvenation reflected the adaptability that had carried Ma Yoshida through most of her 93 years. She had been raised in comfort in Yamaguchi, just west of Hiroshima. As a girl, she was regarded as Ojo-sama, a sort of bourgeois princess destined for a ladylike education and an arranged marriage to a socially acceptable young man. But then there was a war. Instead of continuing to study at her exclusive girls' school in the heart of Hiroshima, Kyoko-chan was assigned to a weapons factory on the city's edge to help in her nation's war effort. Except by August 1945, there were no parts, no materials, no steel, nothing to do at the factory. This is why, on August 6, 1945, Kyoko's girlfriend and fellow factory hand hesitated to board an already overcrowded train. Kyoko replied that if they waited for the next train, they would be late to punch in. The other girl said, "What's the difference? There's no work to do." But Kyoko was a lifelong fuss budget. She couldn't be tardy. She squeezed herself and her friend onto the pack train and left a station that would come to be known, thenceforth and forever, as Ground Zero. A moment later, everything and every person within hundreds of yards was vaporized. Some people dodged bullets. Junko Yoshida dodged an atomic bomb. She saw the mushroom cloud from the window of the factory's locker room and wondered what it was. Work was called off, the train stopped running, and Kyoko headed back to her dormitory on foot. She has always referred to that ghastly journey as a walk through hell. She passed people who staggered violently and fell at her feet, their scorched flesh hanging in strips, as though they'd been skinned alive with blowtorches. She saw people boiled to death in the Ota River. She heard the voices of people inside collapsed buildings, trapped and screaming as the relentless fire consumed them. Ma Yoshida rarely talked about that day, and never for long. She evinced the sort of PTSD silence common to combat veterans and Holocaust survivors, whose desperate need to forget overwhelms the duty to testify. Kyoko grew up suddenly that day, but her most enduring quality is that she preserved somewhere inside the listed schoolgirl who had elbowed her way onto the last train out of Hiroshima. She retained a spark of independence and a touch of mischief that occasionally ignited in her eyes. She passed this subtle impertinence on to both her daughters, to Mariko, gone too young, and to Junko, who married a gaijin and took off around the world. At first, wisely, Ma Yoshida regarded me, the Bekokujin Latinsky, with a deep mistrust. This faded only slowly. I won her over finally when my commentaries on sumo started appearing in a national weekly magazine, Shukan Bunshin. She started carrying copies of the latest issue to show off to her friends. More accurately, she waved the magazine in their faces and bragged on me more than I deserved. It was only a sports column. But boy, nice to have her on my team. In her last years, when she was mostly bedridden, her face would light up to see the family white guy enter her room, pale, bearded, overweight, and easily indistinguishable from all those dour Japanese aides and nurses who invaded her space and plagued her with needles and green jello. Ma Yoshida was a gourmet cook, the queen of tempura, and a seamstress with few peers. Once Junko and I took her to a Sausalito boutique that featured high-priced fashions, frocks, blouses, etc., made from repurposed kimono silk. Ma Yoshida ordered Junko to occupy the sales lady while she surreptitiously memorized the stitching on a particularly cunning and complicated waistcoat. Ma Yoshida presented her, and it took her 5 minutes. Months later, when Junko visited Japan, Ma Yoshida presented her with a perfect duplicate with better silk of the $250 Sausalito vest. I remember a night in Paris. It was cold enough to keep even most Parisians home. Braving the chill, we took Ma Yoshida to a little Italian restaurant on the Ile Saint-Louis called Castafiore. It's gone now. The bistro was almost empty when we arrived. The proprietor, a British chef whom Junko and I had known for years, had sent his staff home. He waited on us personally. After we had finished, with no other customers in the place, the chef, tall and handsome, brought us dessert and sat with us. He proceeded to charm Ma Yoshida, asking questions that Junko translated. He hoped she had enjoyed his cuisine. He scoffed in disbelief when she admitted her age. He praised her excellent taste in fashion. I sat back and watched with quiet pleasure as Ma Yoshida's years melted away, exposing in her blushes and smiles that inner schoolgirl, that hint of playful vanity that life's trials, a war, a bomb, a radioactive nightmare, a daughter lost, her husband gone, had fought so hard to crush. When she was not exactly sweet 16, Ma Yoshida, pretty little Kyoko, had encountered smack dab in the center of his atomic inferno, the Grim Reaper. But after a moment, after trembling at the slaughter he had wreaked, she kicked him in the shin and walked away, a bounce in her step and a twinkle in her eye. Of course, eventually he got her, but it took him another 77 years and a few more whacks on the shin. That's my mother-in-law. She was a sweet lady. To continue. I started writing essays when I was a kid. When I was in high school, I read the State Journal from cover to cover every day, and I studied the op-ed essays of Mike Royko, who was syndicated. He worked for the Chicago newspapers, and he was funny. And Russell Baker, who was also syndicated. I think he was his base was the Washington Post. But I also explored other essay writers. I discovered Jonathan Swift, whose A Modest Proposal is probably the greatest satire of all time. I read Mark Twain's essays, and I find myself referring constantly to an essay he wrote called Fenimore Cooper's Literary Offenses, which is the model for anyone doing literary criticism. I also read E.B. White, who was established at the New Yorker for years and years, and of course H.L. Mencken, who was one of the most sarcastic essayists who ever lived. The character of H.L. Mencken is played by Gene Kelly under another name in the movie and in the play Inherit the Wind. The first essay I think I wrote officially was a literary critique of Sergeant Rock comics that I wrote in 9th grade, and then throughout high school I wrote sketches and stories and the occasional essay for an underground literary magazine started by my friend Bob Schuster called The Id. Over years later, after high school and after college, I became editor of a newspaper in Massachusetts called the Mansfield News, and with the Mansfield News, I was finally able to enter the challenge of essay writing. I had a column on sports called The Fifth Quarter, which was every other week. In the alternate weeks, I wrote a column of social and political commentary called The Fourth Estate. And I also covered the theater in Boston and Providence. So and that was every week. So every week I published a theater critique called Expeditions. And that was 7 years of essay writing, two every week plus editorials. That prepared me for when I moved to Tokyo. Within a few months of moving to Tokyo, I became editor of Tokyo Journal, the English city magazine, because they couldn't find anybody else really. But from that, I ended up writing columns, writing weekly essays for the Japan Times Weekly, which was an English language newspaper, and the Mainichi Daily News, another English language weekly. And of course, I mentioned in my essay about Mao Yoshida that I wrote a sumo column for Shukan Bunshun. Shukan Bunshun was at the time, still is actually, the Japanese equivalent to Newsweek, and it had a circulation somewhere in the vicinity of 30 million. So I was writing about sumo for 30 million Japanese people, and I was then, and I still am the only white guy who's ever been allowed to write about sumo in a major news weekly in Japan. I got away with that for a year. After all those regular gigs were finished, and when I came back to the States, and of course I couldn't write for Japanese newspapers anymore, and I didn't have a regular newspaper job. I sent essays to newspapers all over the country, and I got an occasional bite from an editor, like for instance at the Philadelphia Inquirer, Los Angeles Times. I had essays in both the State Journal and the Cap Times. But that, when the internet came along, so much newspaper work and essay writing and opinion went online, and so newspapers stopped buying op-ed from people who were throwing it over the transom. But I was so committed to keeping up the discipline of writing essays that I started sending out what I call the weekly screed. I write an essay every week, and I follow the example of people like Twain and Russell Baker in that I try to write about a whole wide range of topics. When Junko and I are in Paris, we walk every day past the statue of Michel Montaigne, who was the great, most honored and cherished and revered essayist in all of French letters. And Montaigne, well, there's a statue on the Rue des Écoles. We pass by it every day, and his foot sticks out. And so we pat him on the toe for good luck. And students do that when they're taking tests. So the toe, the Monty's toe, is shiny. The rest of him is dark bronze, but his toe is shiny. And Junko and I get good luck every day from Monty. But the principle that Montaigne operated under, in which every serious essayist and every professional writer tries to follow, is that you have to dare to write about any topic with the awareness that there are experts looking over your shoulder. And what Montaigne teaches the essay writer is that you have to know your limitations. Keep what you write within the context of your knowledge on the topic. For instance, if I'm writing about AI, I know a little bit about AI because my wife is a technology journalist, but if I'm writing about AI, I make sure that I don't say anything about AI that I haven't read or don't know. And the way that works, and the way Montaigne did it, the way Mark Twain did it, is that you don't try to know everything about the topic. You keep within the limitations of your own knowledge, but you draw parallels and connections that the experts, that the technology experts, that the experts in that particular field can't do. It's unavailable to the experts. By using knowledge from other fields to talk about a particular topic, you enlarge people's knowledge of the topic, and you inform people about a topic that they might otherwise not know nothing about. And finally, what I do when I'm writing is that lean on humor. Just as Mark Twain, Jonathan Swift, and Mike Royko and Russell Baker did. And so I try. So when I write an essay, I try there's an old saying in theater: dying is easy, comedy is hard. That's the approach that I take to writing essays, and it's really the approach I take to writing novels and memoirs and so forth too. No, that's everything I need to say about my book and about my writing. It's probably more than you ever wanted to know. But if you have any questions, please go ahead. Yes, Kara.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about Paris.
Well, I have 4 Paris books here.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about, when you moved there and what writing in Paris is like?
Well, writing in Paris is less interrupted than writing here because here I don't have to drive to the grocery store every day for my wife, and I don't have to run a lot of errands. When we're in Paris, we have no car. We walk to the coffee joint in the morning. I come back and I go to work. Unless I occasionally, what I try to do is I take walks in Paris. One of my favorite things to do is to go take the metro subway to the end of the line and then walk back in. Our apartment is right in the middle of Paris, so by walking back into Paris, you discover parts of Paris that you never imagined, and you come across churches that you've never been in, and you stumble into museums that you didn't even know were there, and you see neighborhoods that are completely surprising, and it's a wonderful experience. What was the question again?
What is it like writing?
Yeah, well, when I'm writing, writing. I sit in a room and I work on a keyboard. It's no different really from writing any place. In fact, when my wife and I were living in California, I had a window book out of, and I watched the birds, the bird feeder, and I watched the squirrels trying to climb the wall of the garage to get to the bird feeder. But both here and in Paris, I basically look at the wall and I have the keyboard. But the thing is, every day, if you're a professional writer, you want to get a number of words written every day, or you have to have a good excuse, other work that you're doing that keeps you from doing it. But one writer said that 2,000 words is a good day's writing. I can do better than that. More? Any other questions?
What took you to Paris originally? Where did the idea come from?
Well, Junko and I were living in Tokyo, and she got, at her job, she actually had a job, and she got 2 weeks every year, and we both love Paris. She loves Paris because she does watercolors. She has done the covers of several of my books. These 2. And so she wanted to go to Paris to do watercolors for 2 weeks. And I would go along with her, and I would write, and I would take pictures, and so every year we went to Paris for 2 weeks, and sometimes we were in a hotel, sometimes we were able to stay at the houses, at the apartments of friends who lived in Paris, and they weren't using the apartment at the time, and the apartment living experience basically put us into the frame of mind of looking for a place of our own, under the theory that you have to live in a certain place, but when you buy property, you should buy it in the place you want to be. And we both wanted to be in Paris, so we looked for a place to buy in Paris, and eventually we did. That story is told in an apartment in Paris, which is also Junko's art on the cover. And I mentioned that before, but it was that kind of osmosis of desire to live in the place that we enjoyed so much. Am I finished? Would you like me to read something else?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
Sure.
this is entirely different. Did any of you go to Catholic school?
Yes.
forebears,
Let's see.
or nuns.
Right, okay. This, this is a piece called "But Sister, What If?" And the monograph at the top is from Chubby Checker. He once said, "There's a limbo moon above. You will fall in limbo love." And then this is what I wrote. According to a shocking news bulletin, there are deacons in Catholic churches from Michigan to Arizona, and God knows where else, performing counterfeit baptisms. Over the years, this scandal has affected hundreds, perhaps thousands of unwitting laity who aren't, after all, laity at all, and from whom the mortal stain of original sin has yet to be washed by a real priest with authentic holy water. How serious is this? Picture a dead GI, born in '85 and blown to bits by an IED in Fallujah 20 years later. He finds himself unexpectedly standing not before St. Peter, but at the gates of hell, where Satan strips him naked, confiscates his rosary, rips off his scapular, and shoves a fork in his ass, hustling him toward the lake of fire. And the kid says, "Wait, there must be some mistake. I was a good Catholic. I just went to confession. I did my penance. I went to Mass and took Holy Communion. I know the Apostles' Creed." To which Satan snickers, "You're right, dude. There was a mistake, and it was a doozy." The Associated Press reports that these slovenly Baptists screwed up a crucial word or two amongst the incantations and renunciations packed into the ritual, thus invalidating all those babes welcomed into the church, leaving them, without their parents' knowledge, outside the fold, unredeemed by Jesus, ineligible for the sacraments, and beyond the reach of absolution. Actually, when I read about this snafu, I wasn't worried that all these incomplete Catholics had one-way tickets on the express handcart to perdition. Instead, I drifted back in time to catechism class. Among the rare topics that could turn this ordeal of call and response memorization into sheer whimsy was the mystery of limbo. The nuns at St. Mary's School were spigots of knowledge about the afterlife. Sister Caritas had us up to our eyeballs in visions of heaven and hell. We knew purgatory as a sort of Alcatraz, where venial sinners could beg, freeze, and suffer for a century or so to work off their penance before ferrying to paradise. But limbo? Sister Caritas offered scant suggestions of what goes on there. I imagined limbo as a vast white cloud platform covered with babies in their little onesies, each with a pink or blue blanket, waving their pudgy little hands and kicking their feet. They were all a week or two old, forever. No moms or dads, grandpas or grandmas, just an endless, squirming carpet of forsaken infants. When I heard about those bungled baptisms, my first thought was limbo. I figured this is where the church will have to ship all those luckless schmucks whose christenings got queered by dyslexic deacons. That poor GI, mentioned above, with bad baptismal papers, wouldn't have to go to hell. God can't be that mean, can he? Instead, he'd land in limbo. You can picture him sitting lonely as a cloud in that sea of babies, wishing he had something to read, or maybe a TV. This was the sort of tableau that came to mind among kids in catechism class when a juicy topic like limbo triggered more questions than Sister Caritas had answers. For instance, "Sister, can grown-ups go to limbo?" To this, Sister might pause to ponder the possibility, affording the curious popinjay an opening to elaborate, speculate, and complicate. I mean, Sister, what if someone converted from being like a Lutheran, hisses and boos from the other kids, and he's on his way to church to be baptized, and pow, he's hit by a truck. Would he have to go to hell because he's still a Lutheran, or could he get into limbo? "Yeah, Sister," this from another pupil. "Can you be a Catholic without being Catholic? I mean, if you want to be a Catholic, if you're going to be a Catholic," well, Sister Caritas tries to work this out. More questions pummel her. "Yeah, Sister, what if you go to Mass every Sunday and every holy day, and you go to confession, and you go to communion, and do the Stations of the Cross, and pray on your rosary, but you're not baptized because you live in Russia, or China, or Egypt, or someplace like that? Does that mean you go to hell?" "Yeah, Sister," or limbo, or purgatory? "Yeah, Sister. And what if you're converted by somebody who's not a priest or a nun, and you don't even know you're supposed to be baptized? What then?" "Yeah, and what if you're in like South America, and you had a bad baptism, and you find out it was bad, and you're heading for church for a do-over, but on the way you're kidnapped by communists, They take you to the jungle and put you in a cage, and they torture you for years and years and make you say you don't believe in Jesus and the Virgin Mary anymore. But you do believe, really, in secret, and you say your sincere act of contrition every night. But before you go to confession or get baptized, the communists kill you. Are you going to go to hell, sister? Or limbo? Or purgatory? Picture, if you will, Sister Caritas's dilemma. She's tongue-tied by the lunacy of this question. She gnaws on her lower lip and fumbles with the giant rosary that hangs from her Dominican gun belt. More questions fill the air. Yeah, sister, can a baptism wear off? Do you need like a booster shot? Well, no. Sister, what if the water's not holy? Like if the priest forgot to bless it the night before? Geez, sister, who blesses the water? Does it come blessed already? Yes, sister, do they have holy water in like Russia or India? Sister, what about Antarctica? Sister tries to fight back. Stephen, please, there were no people in Antarctica. Oh no, sister, I saw on TV. But sister, what if the priest forgot to wear his glasses and he pours the holy water and he misses? He doesn't hit the baby's head and nobody notices because they're all playing and stuff. Oh, they're all praying and stuff. Is the baby baptized? Does he go to limbo or purgatory or hell? Sister, what if the godparents gave the wrong answers? Yeah, or what if they're not Catholic? Can Lutherans be godparents? Sister Caritas tries to get control. Bonnie, yes, anyone. But sister, what if the godparents are Catholic, but one of them has a mortal sin on his soul, like he ate a hamburger on Friday and didn't go to confession? Is he still an official godparent? Is the baby still baptized, or will the baby have to go to limbo, or purgatory, or hell? As I recall fondly, this sort of catechismal free-for-all turned a room full of normally languid, evasive kids into a circus of wild congestion. This inquisition resembled a crossover episode of Dragnet and the Twilight Zone, with kids all taking turns as Sergeant Friday and Rod Serling. Each question, while making uncanny sense in the kid mind, explored uncharted depths of doctrinal absurdity. But sister, what if the priest drops the baby into the water and the baby drowns before they can get him out and finish the baptism? What happens then? Does the priest give up on the baptism and do like the last rites? Yes, sister. And does the baby go to limbo? Or purgatory? Or hell? You went to Catholic school.
I don't think we would have got that far.
No, we had a couple of sessions like that. When I was doing CCD classes in Madison, a friend of mine, Paul Keefe, who had been in the seminary, we drove one of the lay teachers pretty much out of the classroom with questions like that. Anyway, that's that. If there are no further questions, I think we're finished. And I appreciate your coming. And I wish there'd been more of you. We should have done this on a Packers game. We got to check the schedule next time.
Yeah. It's something.
But thank you all for coming.
And it's also September 11th. And Big News Day too, for Wednesday.
Yeah,
So,
lots of things
a lot of
going on.
converging of,
Yeah.
And I'm always the last priority. I understand that.
well, and it's,
If anybody wants to buy any books, I'll be glad to sell them. I have my credit card reader, and I tested it earlier, and it seems to work. But I'll also take cash checks, or if you have a goat that you want to give up, I'll take that too.